heard it.
Okay.
Okay, this meeting is being recorded. The listing of matters are those reasonably anticipated by the chair, which may be discussed at the meeting. Not all items listed may in fact be discussed, and other items not listed may also be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by law. So we've already had our executive session. We're returning from the executive session. And the first thing tonight, and I'm sorry it's later than 6:35, is Liz from Spread Serpent proposed overview of draft economic development plan. Hi.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me tonight. Wonderful introduction. I'm really excited to share some of the scenarios and strategies of the Dayton Economic Development Plan. I'm going to start a little bit with some context. So how this plan came together, what we were thinking about and considering when we were developing this plan. In my conversations with town administration, with the DDIC, there was really this sense that there's this push and pull, right? We want economic growth, but we don't want to compromise on our character and who we are as a community. So with that, we really wanted to make sure that this plan considered the appropriate places for growth, how that growth might look and feel, and how to strike that balance between economic growth and our town's greater identity. When I think of how successful this plan is, what's the one marker of success, is being able to lay out a strategy that provides an increase in the commercial tax base, so also increased tax revenues, and enables the town to expand and improve and continue providing great municipal services. So I also want to talk a little bit about what this plan is and isn't. The Dayton Economic Development Plan utilizes tools available to municipalities to encourage and foster economic development. This means we're utilizing zoning, policy, as well as incentives available at the state and federal level to encourage growth in the best ways for Dayton. The visions laid out in this plan are not a certain future, but they represent a version of it. And like any other community, Dayton can't control the interests of private developers, private owners, and we don't pretend to. Instead, we've considered data and trends, which I'll go into a little bit, and feedback from the community and from town officials to really generate this vision that combines all of that. So today we find ourselves talking about the strategies and precedent scenarios, but we've been working on this plan for over a year now. We kicked off in May of 2022, and over the course of that summer, we worked on existing conditions, we worked on identifying key sites and where we would want to kind of focus our growth scenarios on, and we provided a presentation of that in October of 2022. Between then and now, we've really been developing those town-wide strategies, honing those visions, and really being able to say, with this vision, this is how you can achieve it. And today we're sharing these strategies, and this really leads us into kind of the tail end of this process. Over the next month or two, we'll be finalizing feedback, taking it all in, and really producing the final draft of the Dayton Economic Development Plan before the end of the year. So I mentioned earlier I was going to do a little bit of a data dive, and it's very brief, but I do want to take a step back and talk about some of the conditions that we're thinking about when we're saying, why do we want to grow? What are our reasons? And really, it's that when we think of Dayton, it's a growing community, it's well educated, it's affluent. We also want to look at its taxes and how the tax burden is being balanced. So Dayton, as you can see here, has the highest tax rate compared to its neighbor's residential tax rate. And it also has the second highest commercial and industrial tax rate. This means that Dayton's thinking, okay, our commercial and our industrial activities make more of a strain on our infrastructure, on our water, sewer, so they should be paying their fair share of all of this. Unfortunately, it's not really turning out that way. New growth year to year shows that the new tax revenue being generated is largely through residential growth. And it's just saying that there's not enough commercial and industrial activity to contribute as much as we want to see. So the balance is off. And we're thinking that this is a reason why we may need and desire more commercial and industrial growth. At the same time, we also want to think about industry in Dayton. When we looked at 2012 to 2022 data, we found that Dayton's top 5 industries include wholesale trade, educational services, manufacturing, other services, and retail trade. So those are its top 5 industries. And we really use this as a way to consider, where do we want to grow? Where should we gear our policies toward? And we found that in the last 10 years, our largest industries that are seeing a decline include educational services and manufacturing, while other services and retail trade are seeing an increase over time. And there are some growing industries that we're paying attention to as well that I've listed below. So that's Dayton in a bubble, just looking at Dayton itself. So when we want to compare our industry and look at how our concentration of a certain industry is compared to a greater region, we'll look at location quotient. So this really tells us how concentrated an industry is in Dayton compared to the metro region, which that includes Providence and Bristol County, as well as the state. And we found that Dayton is the most competitive in administrative and waste services, other services, retail trade, as well as professional and technical services. So this was one way, again, another lens to be able to say, maybe these are some ways in which we can gear our economic development and how to make that fit with Dayton's character again. So this leads me into our key corridors and sites. We broke it down into this kind of pattern because we have a number of corridors that on a general basis we have a vision for. We think we want growth in a certain way. For example, the Route 44 business corridor, we're identifying mixed use and commercial and infill redevelopment. And then there are a number of other sites, specific sites that we identified as potential areas for growth. So I want to provide a few samples of some of the visions that we've created and provided in this plan. One of them is the Interplas site. Redevelopment of this site enables greater and higher value uses, and we really wanted to take into account that it's close to a neighborhood and it's right along the 3 Mile and Taunton River. So this means we really thought this would be a perfect site to incorporate a riverfront park and enhance pedestrian connections. Based on existing uses there and maybe changing them just a tiny bit, we could accommodate mixed use and artisan light manufacturing enabled by new zoning or changes to zoning. So the images you see below this illustration are real world developments that are already either developed or being constructed as we speak. And we thought either their perception would be received positively by the town, and that's something that you could model after. Not to the letter, but in a style and to a density. The second vision that we wanted to bring up was Spring Street Mill. Now, Spring Street, I know, is a brownfield site, and I know that can scare some people, but there is a path for remediation for any brownfield site. And remediation at Spring Street specifically enables redevelopment of existing spaces and really provides new opportunities. Again, we thought about the fact that this former industrial site is next to a neighborhood and it's also along the 3 Mile River. So again, we wanted to enhance those connections, harness the kind of economic development that you can do along a riverfront and provide spaces for that make those connections. We also thought Spring Street Mill could accommodate mixed use and artisan zoning, as well as an industrial inspired event space for public and private functions. So I also want to go into some town-wide strategies. These visions and this taste that I'm giving you is only made possible by providing a really clear set of implementation steps, and that's what the town-wide strategies do. We've broken them up into 5 different categories: zoning, protecting and promoting Dayton's natural resources, brownfields remediation, infrastructure and maintenance, and finally Dayton character and neighborhood placemaking. I won't go through all of them right now, but I did want to highlight some that I thought were really characteristic of the town and really showed how we were thinking about context and character, but still being able to enhance our commercial and industrial activities here in town. So this one first covers zoning, and with this one, we really wanted to highlight artisan zoning. Manufacturing, as we know, is kind of changing. The trend to purchase hyper-local and artisan products is on the rise. You'll see farmers markets, you'll see incubators, and we'll talk about that a little bit more after as well. So we thought that this might be a really great way to market light industrial use in town. Given constraints to water and sewer, as well as a local interest for smaller and moderate scale developments, artisan zoning produces activities that create very little noise, create very little fumes, if any, and make these activities suitable for places where there might be a closer neighborhood or some kind of commercial activity. And, again, this promotes that type of tax increase and revenue that we'd like to see in small business opportunities in town. So this really talks about connections to the wild and scenic Taunton and the 3 Mile Rivers. We're looking at enhancing connections to trails and also really tapping into our agricultural economy here in Dayton. And we can do this through a number of strategies and recommendations, and one of which we proposed was an agriculture or kitchen incubator space. Though agriculture is changing in Dayton and may play a smaller role than it once did, farming is still an important part of Dayton's culture, and I get that when I talk to residents, when I talk to Mike and Dan. So we really thought that Dayton could enhance its agricultural economy through incubator space, really meant to support that industry, tapping into local partnerships, maybe Bristol Aggie or CMAP. We recognize that there are limitations to growth in town due to water and sewer infrastructure, and we really make that a key element of this plan, talking about how without these infrastructure improvements, we really can't grow in the way we want. And we lay out a path for funding for design and engineering, which makes the town even more attractive when it comes time to pursue construction funds. This one talks about brownfields redevelopment. I mentioned earlier that brownfields can be a very intimidating process, but we really do break down a path for remediation. We consider the brownfields that exist in Dayton and what kind of process that might present itself as. We understand that these are privately owned parcels, but the fact is that there are different ways to pursue remediation that include public-private partnerships. And lastly, we want to talk about Dayton's character and placemaking, and we talk about ways to enhance connections, again, through our natural resources, expanding programming for our small businesses, and also promoting agritourism. So Dayton has a right to farm community bylaw, which incorporates agritourism. This promotes farm diversification. We recognize that additional streams of income create more sustainable models for farmers, and that this enables harvest festivals, pick your own activities, but it is unclear whether or not weddings or events are allowed activities and how they would be managed in town if they were to be proposed. So something to explore, not necessarily a recommendation that needs to be included, but something that a lot of communities are beginning to integrate and grapple with. So before I get into questions, I do just want to set the table for next steps. We'll be at the Dayton Arts Festival this Sunday with this information. We're welcoming feedback through the next 2 months, so please feel free to email me with any comments or questions. And there will be a presentation on December 20th to present the final plan.
29th, right?
29th, is that the planning board meeting that
The-
we discussed?
The 29th would be like a joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen and the DBIC.
Okay, we can change that.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, you're right. We will hopefully have the approval of the plan on the 29th of November.
Mm-hmm.
And then with the presentation to the planning board on December 20th.
Okay, yes. Any questions?
Yes. One thing I just want to correct from earlier, 8 o'clock is when we have to be there for the Arts Festival. 9 o'clock is when it starts.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for the
Sorry,
clarification.
yes, I just wanted to, like I said, take care. Brownfields. What kind of funding is there to help clean up?
There's state funding available, and there's also federal funding that we can tap into through the EPA.
In the fact that they're on private land?
So, I mean, I think it changes the approach, but it doesn't mean it's out of the question.
Okay.
There are, like I said, different paths that you can take. One where the town takes it over, but that only happens in very, very special situations.
Right.
One where the private developer can pursue it on their own.
Okay.
Or it's a public-private partnership where
Yeah.
both the town and the private owner, you know, work on it together, figure out the best path forward, and the plan does outline how each of those work. I also want to mention that SERPED works very closely with the EPA on brownfield redevelopment, and we have funding right now to really help communities that are looking to remediate brownfield sites, you know, do an assessment. And sometimes it doesn't involve, you know, major testing or anything like
Right.
that, but
Okay.
yeah.
So it sounds like a private-public investment would be the best out of all options.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And I don't think there's necessarily a best path forward, it's best for the situation.
Right, it's best for us.
Yes.
It concerns me that the presentation is great in the fact that we have brownfield sites for development. We'd have to convince these owners, in addition to cleaning up, that it would still be in the best interest of the town and them to clean it up and then go the next step and renovate and develop.
For sure, for sure.
Okay.
That is a process in and of itself. I think building that relationship, and sometimes it is just talking to them about what options are available to them in partnership with the
Yeah.
town.
Have you talked to any of them yet?
No.
Okay.
No.
All right. And same thing as construction funds. Again, a federal state partnership.
So there are state funds available, depending what type of infrastructure we're talking about. For like water, there's a little bit of both.
Yeah.
And there's also partnerships that we can pursue, like intermunicipal agreements and that type of thing. I'm thinking for water, there is, I believe, USDA funding available. Also, if we're talking about infrastructure for construction, there's federal funding for that. I do make a distinction in the plan that the town should kind of phase the development of these things, pursue design and engineering funding first, and that's available at the state level through the MassWorks like pre-development program, and then pursue construction funds. Because
Okay.
when you apply for construction funds, they always want to see that you're shovel ready.
Right. Okay. One of the things about 44 is we have no sewer.
Yep.
And the cost to bring sewer there has been prohibitive for
Yep.
a town like Dayton. Obviously, you can't give us figures, but that's something that these construction funds would be applied to.
It's definitely possible if we can make the case for an application to get grant funding.
Okay.
Yep.
I know Mike would handle the application process, but is there a certain amount of money that we would have to have up front?
It really depends on the program. Some programs do require a match. It ranges anywhere from 20 to 50% depending on the program you go
Before we
through.
even apply, or?
Another thing that depends on the program. Some programs like to see that you have it from the get-go, the minute you submit your application. Others, you know, a commitment that you'll have it or that you're gonna vote on it at a certain date and time. That also might suffice, but like I said, it really depends on the program.
Zeneca, what were they figured as I know we kind of took it off the table for different reasons, but what kind of funding would a site like that be available for? 100% from?
I don't want to say 100%. I don't think that would be accurate.
Okay.
But there are funds out there that, based on findings, would lead us to say, you know, okay, phase 1, these are the findings. That leads us to phase 2.
Yeah.
That tells us what path of remediation we can take. and what kind of, density, what kind of intensity of development you could put there.
Right.
Right.
I
Because
don't
that,
think-
that might, eliminate certain uses versus others.
Okay,
Mhm.
I don't think Zeneca has any interest in funding anything, so that's why I was wondering how much would the state or federal would chip in?
Yeah, that'd be something that we could look at more specifically, and find out more about like what that match might be. I know
Okay.
there are funds available, I just don't know the
Sure.
match.
Okay. I know Mr. Hull has some questions, so I'll let him take over.
Thank you. Actually, I have one. In regards to water,
Mm-hmm.
have you worked with any community in the early stages of PFAS remediation?
I can't say I have, no. No, do you think that's something that would be important to mention in this plan?
I can't speak for the Dayton Water District because they're a separate legislative body,
Mm-hmm.
but that's going to be a major issue throughout the comment
Okay.
as the EPA moves from the standard of 20 to 4. I know in talks in the governor's office, Barnstable County alone
Okay.
is $1 billion.
Okay.
So,
Alright. I'm just making a note of that.
I know in the case of Dayton, at the water district, it will be at least $3 million to upgrade their filters.
Oh, okay, okay.
So they would need help, but they have not really, they've talked about it in the preliminary stages.
Mm-hmm.
So as the liaison to the water district, if you do have information and can be of help, please let me know. And I'll set up a meeting with you and Mr. Clunin
Okay,
and
yeah. Do
superintendent
you,
of
do
the
you
water
have
district.
that estimate, that report?
I'm sorry?
Do you have a copy of that report or
I can
estimate?
get that for you.
Okay, that would be great, thank
Thank
you.
Mr. Mel? Nothing at this point? Do you want to continue on? Or, I know we have a couple of gentlemen from the public who this would certainly involve. Everything from the chairman to the DDIC and open space and Dan, I don't know if you're ready to ask some questions yet, or you want to continue?
A couple questions. One is, and I think you've mentioned it in there, and maybe just elaborate a little bit, is what growth we have seen in businesses are mostly home-based.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously they're complying for the most part with, certification with the town, they're on the certificate, the building commissioner agrees to it if it's appropriate. But what kind of zoning changes might be applicable that would bring that more towards a revenue generator for the town, those home-based businesses,
Mm-hmm.
and or allow, I wouldn't say legal because they're legal now, but allow greater flexibility in what and how it's controlled those same businesses, could be. Because one of the constraints that Dayton has, and not something you can get around easily, is land.
Mm-hmm.
So much wetlands, conservation land. We've had people who wanted to come and put up like a 10,000 square foot building and say, there's no place to put it,
Mm-hmm.
that they could either acquire or that was just available,
Right.
which is why you see a lot of small businesses and mostly in residential areas that home base.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that also speaks to why a lot of the development opportunities that we're identifying are infill development on existing sites.
Right.
Like Spring Street, Interclass, that's all just expanding the footprint on that site. And I think the reason why the incubator space was so appealing was because it gives a space for some of those home-based businesses to scale up, and possibly move out of that home base if they're interested in that.
Right.
We use Hope in Maine and Warren, Rhode Island as the example of something to model after. And they report really great success with the businesses that go through their programs. But we do highlight the home-based business zoning in Dayton. I think it's just truly figuring out what kind of management you guys want to put on home-based businesses, to what extent that might go. And we can explore that a little bit further if you want to.
Home base is a great point to bring up. is probably more than half of our businesses here in Dayton is home-based. I don't know what kind of relief or what kind of funds would be available for them to expand that, just because of the growth in that segment. Is there anything that we can do to assist them?
Yeah, so we actually highlight expanding programming and resources to kind of strengthen the small business community in Dayton, and that incorporates the home-based businesses. We talk about some of the work that the DDIC is already doing, you know,
Right.
taking inventory of who they are, where to find them, giving them a little bit of highlight them, right? We also talk about partnerships and small business support that's out there in the region and available to people that, who knows if they're aware of them or if we're tapping into it and creating that connection and partnership. And some of those include, you know, providing business plan support, finance support, being able to kind of scale up if they're interested in that. So, I mean, I think part of it is building relationships, enhancing their visibility in the community too.
Sure.
And addressing some of that zoning, because if that's an important piece of it, we can definitely add that in.
This next comment, as a selectman, maybe I shouldn't be making it, but some of them are illegal. And we'd like to drive them towards being legal, and, but don't want them to be turned away either.
Right.
So when I mean illegal, I don't mean what they do is illegal. It's just, they're there unrestricted, no permits,
Yep.
those types of illegal activities, so to
Yeah.
speak.
So my understanding is that Dayton is moving to an online permitting system.
Yes.
I think that facilitates things a lot, and being able to guide home-based businesses to a process. Like, if
Yeah.
I have a home-based business, what do I need to
Sure.
do? I think that is a very simple but clear solution to some of that, right?
Right.
Because sometimes people are like, oh, it's my home, I can, you know.
Yes, absolutely. We've, Jim Aguirre is here, who's our building official, and I'm sure he can speak to that as well, but Jim, do you have any questions?
No, not at this time.
Okay,
I'm looking forward to being part of the process, though.
absolutely. And Paul?
I did have a question, if that's
Sure.
okay. One of my favorite recommendations that shows me that we've been on the right track here in Dayton prior to reading through this is that one of the recommendations to create a user-friendly development and permitting guide. Our permitting and compliance team, town administrator's office, board of selectmen, and a variety of boards, commissions, and officials have all been working very hard the last year plus to streamline and make more transparent our permitting process and to eliminate any kind of silo mentalities and make it so that a person who wants to do things the right way can kind of feel as close to as if they're on the conveyor belt to move through the
Yeah.
process as possible. And the building commissioner Aguirre has been a huge part of moving over to the online permitting system and has been hugely helpful to my office in that regard. But one of the questions I had would be, has Serpent provided any such guidance or helped communities to kind of marry their departmental jurisdictions together in a way that is more cohesive and help to streamline and make things move smoothly for businesses that do wanna do things the right way? Or is there any cases that you could point to or
Yeah.
any resources that can be provided to help kind of make it more seamless for us?
So we've completed a couple permitting guides for a number of communities in the region. I can share copies of those if
I
that's
would love that,
helpful.
please.
And you know, like you said, it really just lays it out, and it's not just for home-based businesses or small businesses. It's really, if you need a permit in town, what is the process and what does that look like? Of course, it has its economic benefits. That's why it's included in this plan. But there are widespread benefits to having that kind of permitting guide in town. Sometimes bylaws and zoning, it's hard to navigate if you're not familiar with
Right.
it. And being able to go to a one-stop shop that says A, B, C, and you know, we're here to help you along the way, and who to contact is really
Right.
important.
We've done that with a few of our other committees, boards in town, departments, and it seems to work out well.
Yeah.
Mr. Hall, did you have another question?
Listen, I'm not sure you're aware, but the town of Dayton, through the DDIC, has a wonderful TV program. It's called Spotlight. Mr. Reynolds is the host of it. And one of the things, we spotlight businesses, but we're also going to be spotlighting questions that the general public may have. One that's coming up soon is the assessors having a joint meeting and discussion. So businesses, commercial enterprises, they have tax questions. They can call in, or people from the assessor's office will explain the intricacies of the personal property tax, how commercial properties are assessed. So the issue of the home businesses is something that has come on the radar of the DDIC, the assessor's office, to some degree zoning. So that might be a vehicle, the spotlight, to talk about and to inform the public what needs to be done. Because I think in many of those businesses, they just don't know what they need to do, rather than just being clandestine.
Right, agreed, yeah, no, that's a great strategy, something good to have in the community.
I did have one more question, if that's okay. I love the emphasis on agritourism, and as you said, that our residential growth has been our primary driver. And I think that things like the meeting spaces, the brew pubs, and some of those aspects of that do a good job of capturing growth from our residential, because those are service, those are service and destination places where they can kind of develop economic growth through the residential population by giving people a place to go and spend their money. But one question I did have is, I love the way that the rail trail cuts through the property, because I'm on the DDIC, I'm also on the Conservation Commission. There's not much that gets me able to be excited about both at the same time. But one question I had, is there any concerns, either from like a maintenance, zoning, or liability perspective, from having the rail trail essentially kind of run through the heart of what is essentially private property?
Yeah, I think that might require a more in-depth study of that. I think we were just thinking, if we're visioning this, what would be an ideal connection through that site? So I probably would leave that to the, open space and recreation experts and people who design and maintain those trails. But I think that's something that could be explored a little bit further. Unfortunately, I don't know if I have that much to provide in that respect. Thank you.
I did just have one other question too, which is that when you talk about infrastructure zoning, other incentives, there underlies all of it an assumption that if you build it, they will come. And from talking with businesses around town, I know that historically, and probably still today, Dayton has a rather bad rap about not being business friendly. Some of what like Paul's doing with the spotlights, or some of the other things that DDIC's done, has been to try to let people know that no, we really do appreciate the businesses that are in town. But having said that, it's not enough to just say if you build it, they will come. How do you advertise that? That we're open for business, we want business, we're friendly to it. And that's something that the DDIC has talked about. Paul has some connections with friends who are developers. Mr. Hull knows people from the Taunton area that we're trying to explore, but are there either recommendations, or is that even something that Serpent itself can help the town with? How do you promote it once you've got it?
Right. It's a really good question. And it's really tough to say, because what works in one community doesn't always resonate in another. I think the fact that we're putting together an economic development plan in the first place says, we want change, we're looking for it, and signaling that, we want it in a very specific way. Hopefully this will be kind of step one in doing that. Step two is, implementing some of these changes to facilitate that type of growth that we're looking at. You could take it a step further. I don't talk about it in the plan, but if that's something of interest, we could incorporate it, but like marketing or something like that. But like I said, it really depends on the town and what would resonate the most with residents. I guess I'd be curious to hear what your friends are saying and what your contacts are saying, where the kind of gap is, and how we can kind of fill that.
So they say location is everything, but it's certainly not true for some places that have become destinations and things have developed around them. to Dan's point, what aid do we get to promote these locations that are not drive-bys? They will hopefully become a destination.
Yep.
Because I think a lot of people today aren't willing to make an investment on one of these mills when you consider that they're not even on a main street, well, maybe Main to Dayton, but not enough to attract drive-by businesses, drive-by patrons.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why, for example, Route 44, we talk quite a
Little bit
bit
different.
in the plan. That we think of it as like a gateway into
Yeah.
Dayton, right? I think being able to make connections, and that's why we talk a lot about like nodes in the community. You know, if we're talking about Main Street as an area to visit, okay, that's one node. We also have what we want to be another village center at Center Street and 138, that's another node. So kind of creating connections between all the different vibrant areas in town. And it is hard to say, right? You know, there's no way to say that all of these changes will exactly complete the visions that we're saying. Like I said, they're a version of a potential future. But I think implementing some of these steps will go a long way in making that happen. And it's having the right conversations and building relationships with private partners as well.
Right. You're not finished with your presentation, right?
I
Or you
am,
are?
yes,
Okay.
yes.
I know we have public input next, and we're kind of informal, so.
Yeah, okay, I just had a couple of quick questions.
Sure.
What was it, 43D? Remediation. Now, is Seneca currently funding the remediation at Main Street?
I don't know.
Yes,
The whole nut, right?
yes,
So
they're
why-
at the very, 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 oh yeah, like infancy of that whole process.
Right,
which will
it's only
take
been the
about
last 6 or 8 months, right?
Yes, yep.
So they're paying for that, so why would government have to step in? That's just a colossal waste of taxpayers' money, number one. Number two is the 43D thing, is that kind of a slapdash administrative, hey, it's clean now, certification, or do people actually go in there and clean it up, and why would we slow down Zeneca with more and more government regulation and so forth, just let them do their thing and clean it up? My biggest worry there is if some jackass gets the idea of putting a series of townhouses or something there, you're gonna have a cancer cluster within a short amount of time, because it's, you know, what the various industries did to that area over the course of the last century and a half, it's inexcusable. That's number one. Number two, my deepest concern is anything you take from the government when they hand something out, whether it's a grant or, you know, an allowance or an indulgence, let's say. Anything you take from them, there's a cost. You know, if you look at the library, you have the green energy mandate that's attached to it. So that's one cost. You know, there are a lot of costs that are associated with these types of things, and regulations too. So I'm very, very concerned about the direction the town's going. I'm concerned about just the wild development, particularly with regard to rental property, because when there's too much rental property, that becomes a burden on the rest of the tax base and so forth.
Not to interrupt, are you referring to home rental?
Well, I'm
property or
referring to,
just
yeah,
rentals?
because with all of this will come the mandates for more housing. Selectman Hull is fond of quoting Governor Healy saying she wanted to build how many houses?
200,000 units of housing in the next 10 years.
Exactly, whether or not they're profitable, whether or not there's, you know, any intrinsic economic value to having these houses there, they're gonna build them.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a burden on the communities, because it's going to bring in a lot of the mendicant classes and so forth that are going to usurp the resources of the community.
We took townhouses off the table.
Good.
That was early on. We made it quite clear
Excellent.
that was not going to happen.
Forced zoning. Is that another thing?
Forced?
Yeah, there are certain types of zoning, and Paul, you know about this stuff because you're on all those committees. Are there any types of zoning that, you know, it's, you have to allow this certain thing, you have to allow this if you allow this.
Perhaps Dan being on the planning board could speak to what the
Okay, yeah.
specifics of I know there's a village zoning district, but I couldn't tell you really
There
much
are,
about it.
to the best of my knowledge, I haven't been on the planning board, you know, all that long, all zoning in the town has been at the town's direction.
Good.
At meeting, you know, at town meeting adoption, there's nothing that's been forced upon the town in any way.
Okay.
We're not looking to build up the residential community, and I think the businesses that we're looking to go after would be certainly businesses that become the destination, not necessarily having to house the people who are going to visit those
Well,
destinations.
there is that, and I do worry that, you know, it becomes a thing like you see in Providence and different places where they'll have, we'll call it an artist's community.
Sure, and then
I swear to God, I'll think it's,
apartments above.
and, well, there's apartments above, but then there's also this unprofitable artist community down there where hippies making pottery is no way to create wealth, I mean,
Right.
God. So, anyway, I'm sorry, Mr. Hull, you had
there is something, and I'm not sure if you're alluding to it or not, that has been bandied about the community, and it's certainly out there. And I think Mr. Mullen can speak on it more clearly with more knowledge of it and Lizette, and that is the MBTA impact zone proposals that are out there. And where does Dayton stand in that process?
hopefully far away. You're talking MBTA, Mass Bay Transit Authority.
Yes, so the state probably about a year and a half, 2 years ago now, for like every community that either hosts or is adjacent to an MBTA station, they have, they probably over the last year have been required to update their zoning for housing. We don't have the MBTA or the commuter rail going through Berkeley or Taunton yet. However, when it does, we do have the possibility, based on state law, to be designated as an MBTA adjacent community. When that does happen, if it happens, because it would take it after the legislature, we would for that purpose have to update our zoning to include a zoning area that would be in compliance with density requirements that the MBTA has for adjacent communities. However, we're not one yet, and we probably won't be for at least the next 2.5 years.
So next question, Mike,
Mhm.
sorry.
No, it's okay.
Chairman, through you, are these laws or are these mandates?
They are states. They are Massachusetts general laws that are also now regulations as well.
So the general laws, do you have the chapter and verse on those, and can you get them to me if you?
Yeah, no, I can follow up. Yep, absolutely.
Awesome, thank you.
Is it just a host community, or is it a circumference around the station? So
Yes,
that you
yeah,
might fall
adjacent.
into, so,
We would likely be an adjacent community.
okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Galucci,
Yes.
just for your edification, the town of Braintree has resisted, and the AG has brought them into court, and they are currently in court, because they don't want to comply.
And you don't have to comply.
Well,
And that's the thing, and I think some things are a hill worth dying on, because, you know, quality of life is something. You know, it's the reason a lot of us moved here in the first place, that there's a quality of life, and that you're not in the big city or adjacent to one or any of that. So, that's all. But anyway, those are my concerns with this whole thing, so, yeah, that's about that.
Okay, any more questions? Well, I think a big thank you is in order.
Yes, thank you.
You did a tremendous job, and we look forward to certainly continuing in the future.
Yes, for sure. Thank you so much for your time. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me.
Okay.
And thank you, Zach.
Moving on, is there any other public input?
Actually, I just have an announcement.
Sure.
There's no announcements on the agenda. The Dayton Water District will be holding their annual special meeting on November 8th at 7 p.m. at the Dayton Middle School. The big item in the list of articles is a transfer of $540,000 for work on the Cedar One well, actually the rebuilding of the Cedar One well. Thank you.
So all three people are gonna attend?
Well, I don't know, the one who usually goes has
Thank you, Zach.
a selectmen's
Appreciate
meeting. So,
Mrs. Miller, we're gonna go right into announcements if you're ready.
The town parking ban, no person shall park a motor vehicle between the hours of 12 midnight to 6 a.m. on any street from November 1st of each year to April 1st of the following year. Veterans Day breakfast will be held on November 4th, 2023 to express our gratitude and appreciation to all the veterans in town. The breakfast will be held at Old Town Hall, 1111 Somerset Avenue, between 9 a.m. and 11 a.m. RSVP, the Veterans Agent, 774-872-0944. The Veterans Day ceremony will take place on Saturday, November 11th, 2023 at 10 a.m. at the Veterans Memorial, 979 Somerset Avenue. The Town of Dayton's Food Bank will be held next on November 18th, located at the Town Hall, 979 Somerset Ave. This is in the lower level. The Dayton Council on Aging received a license through the Massachusetts State Lottery to play bingo every Monday from 1 to 2 p.m. at the Dayton Council on Aging, 1059 Somerset Ave, starting in October. Cards are $1 each. Please bring cash. Come and support the
I love how they say that.
I'm gonna start saying that to the selectmen meeting, please bring cash. Come and support the Friends of the Dayton Public Library and create a beautiful Christmas wreath on Tuesday, December 5th, 2023 at 6 p.m. at Ruggiero Farms, 1522 Williams Street. The price is $45 per person. You can call or stop by to sign up and prepay for the class. You can call 508-669-6988.
Please bring cash. Mr. Muller, is there a town administrator's report today?
I actually don't have one this evening, other than I like cash.
Okay. So what, are you saying you could be bought?
No, that's,
Get that on
that's
the
a good
record.
clarification, thank you.
Old business, there's none. New business, review, discuss, and act on the collective bargaining agreement with the clerical union fiscal year 24 through 26. The contract was ratified
Yes, it was by the union.
by the union, what date was it, yesterday?
It was ratified on Monday.
On Monday, which is a great thing. It was a procedure, quite a procedure to go through. And just some highlights from the clerical union. The wage increases were 2%, 2.5%, and 2.5%, reflecting the fiscally oriented agreement. The 2.5 is steps for the next 3 years. There was a longevity increase for senior long tenured employees. Implementation of the wage step scale at the end of the third year. We bargained out clothing allowance for job-associated accrediting, I'm saying it wrong. Credentialing. Wow. Vacation payouts for retiring employees or those leaving town of Dayton employment will only be based on vacation time accrued and prorated. No more payout a whole year's worth of vacation at the beginning of the year. Updated sick time, abuse language from in FMLA leave provisions. Modernized job descriptions that reflect 2023 municipal functions, performance evaluation process, and updated grievance and discipline process. there any questions about those, highlights from the the clerical union?
No.
No.
So we have to make a motion to accept the clerical union agreement, and, approve it.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve the collective bargaining agreement between the town of Dayton and the Massachusetts Laborers District Council on behalf of public employees, local union 272 of the Laborers International Union of North America, AFL-CIO, on behalf of the Dayton Town Clerical Library and Council on Aging.
I'll second that.
Second, is a motion and seconded, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And Peter Karen is an aye, thank you. The warrants paid for November 2nd, 2023.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that the town of Dayton pay the warrants for November 2nd, 2023. Item 19A-24, $114,283.21. And Article 19B-24, $884,546.71.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And Peter Karen is an aye. And I'm just trying to find a letter from, well, it doesn't matter, I guess. A letter from Tom Pyer's resignation from the Solid Waste Committee. Mr. Pyer sent us a letter saying, dear board, that he would resign immediately. It was dated October 27th, 2023. Is there a motion on the floor to
I
accept
make
it?
a motion to accept Mr. Pyer's resignation with sincere thanks and appreciation.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Peter Karen is an aye. We have a letter from Chief McGee, appointment of 2 new members to the call fighter paramedic ranks. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm skipping one. Brian Tracy, no, I'm not. Is it, so an appointment of a new member to the call firefighter / paramedic ranks, and this, Brian Tracy. So is there a motion on the floor to accept?
Actually, before we make the motion of appoint, just so everyone understands, the appointment of firemen is the responsibility of the fire chief under the fire chief strong law, or the strong fire chief law. And as a result, Mr. Tracy's absence here does not preclude us from appointing him.
Okay, great point, thank you.
With that being said, I'd like to make a motion to appoint Brian Tracy as a new member of the call firefighter paramedic unit.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Peter Karen's an aye. A letter from the Chief McGee again regarding promotions for Call Lieutenant Samuel Payne Jr. to the captain.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to promote Samuel Payne to the position of captain.
I'll second that.
Is that Payne or Pine?
With Pine.
Pine?
Pine, I think his
Okay.
name is,
Yes.
right?
It says Payne
Yes.
here.
Yeah.
Pine, Samuel Pine Jr. to the rank of captain, Dayton Fire Department.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Peter Karen is an aye. Call firefighter Zachary Summers to lieutenant.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to appoint firefighter Zachary Summers to the position of lieutenant on the Dayton Fire Department.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And Peter Karen is an aye. And again, those 2 gentlemen did not have to be here because of the chief's relationship. Minutes for approval, regular meeting minutes of October 25th.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve the Board of Selectmen regular meeting minutes of October 25th, 2023.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And Peter Karen is an aye. Then adjournment.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Peter Karen is an aye. Thank you.
Thank you.